This is Agent Mode AI. I'm Abby. Today, we're walking the 4 claims that together describe the bimodal ROI distribution in enterprise agentic AI. AM029, AM132, AM128, and AM053. 4 independent datasets converge on the same shape. The procurement question the convergence answers is what the high-performing cohort does that the struggling body does not.
I'm Avery. Frame the 4 numbers.
Stanford Digital Economy Lab's 2026 Enterprise Agentic AI Playbook tracks 51 enterprise agentic AI deployments at 12 to 18 months post-production deployment. 12% clear 300% plus ROI. 88% operate at or below break-even. The distribution is not a Gaussian with a long tail. It is 2 distinguishable peaks separated by a discontinuity. Gartner Q1 2026 Infrastructure and Operations data reports 28% of AI projects are fully paying off. McKinsey State of AI 2025, with 1,993 respondents, reports 23% scaling agentic AI and 17% EBIT attribution at the 12-month horizon. MIT NANDA's Gen AI Divide reports 95% of analyzed pilots delivered no measurable P&L impact.
4 numbers, same shape.
Same shape, different cuts of the same underlying pattern. The bimodal distribution recurs across 4 independent datasets with different methodologies and different sample populations. That recurrence is the procurement relevant signal. The variable separating the 2 cohorts is consistent across the 4 cuts.
Start with AM128, the MIT 95%.
AM128 is the claim that the MIT 95% statistic is 95% of Gen AI pilots delivered no measurable P&L impact, based on roughly 150 senior executives interviewed, 350 employees surveyed, and 300 publicly disclosed Gen AI deployments analyzed in August 2025. The 95% finding is the share of pilots that produced no measurable P&L impact. The slippage in 2026 procurement decks is between no measurable P&L impact and the pilot failed.
2 different things.
2 different things. First, absence of measurement is not presence of failure. Most enterprise Gen AI pilots in 2024-2025 did not have a documented pre-deployment P&L baseline. Without a baseline, no measurable P&L impact is the default finding regardless of whether the pilot moved the operational needle. Second, project versus deployment ambiguity. An enterprise running 20 projects with 1 delivering measurable impact would classify as 5% success on a project-weighted view and 100% success on an any project produced value view. The 95% fail framing implies the former. Procurement questions usually want the latter.
What's actually useful in the report?
The build versus buy spread. 67% buy success versus roughly 22% build success. Per the report and the Fortune coverage, purchasing AI tools succeeded 67% of the time, while internal builds panned out only 1/3 as often. A 2026 enterprise budgeting and internal build approach is, on the report's data, accepting a 3 times worse outcome distribution than the buy approach. That is the most actionable finding in the report, and the one most procurement teams ignore in favor of the headline.
Move to AM28, the Stanford piece.
AM28 walks the Stanford Digital Economy Lab's bimodal 1288 finding. 12% of deployments clear 300% plus ROI at 12 to 18 months. 88% operate at or below break-even. The Stanford 88% and the MIT 95% are not the same number. Stanford measured deployments with documented baselines that had reached 12 to 18 months in production. MITRE measured pilots with no required baseline at any maturity stage. But both numbers point at the same operational reality. Most enterprise Gen AI work in 2024-2025 was not yet producing measurable enterprise-level value.
The 12% cohort and the 5% MITRE cohort.
The Stanford 12% bimodal success cohort and the MIT 5% integrated systems created significant value cohort are similar in shape and probably overlapping in identity. The thesis the publication tracks is that the operational discipline that produces the 12% is what produces the 5% in the MIT cut. The discipline is observable, it is not random, it is reproducible enough to instrument against.
AM132, the bimodal piece.
AM132 is the restored URL. Was AM014 status down on the holding up ledger after the original WordPress era body used composite case studies that did not survive editorial scrutiny? The new body anchors on the 4 datasets we're walking and reframes the 7327 framing the slug carries as a rounded aggregation of the 4 cuts rather than a precise statistical claim. The bimodal shape is the load-bearing finding. The exact percentage points vary by methodology.
What the high-performing cohort does that the struggling body does not.
6 dimensions. The publication tracks them under the GAUGE framework. First, governance maturity. The cohort has a named accountable owner for the deployment, a documented decision authority for tool use changes, and an escalation path that is exercised at least quarterly. Deployments without a named owner default into the struggling cohort regardless of other strengths.
2.
Threat model. The cohort treats the agent's tool graph as a security surface and runs an explicit red team cycle against it. The struggling cohort typically ran a generalized pen test that does not exercise any of the 4 agent-specific surfaces and passed. The OWASP agentic AI top 10 names the threats. The agent red team is the discipline that tests whether the defenses hold.
3.
ROI evidence. The cohort has a documented pre-deployment baseline before pilot day 1. MIT NANDA's central finding is dominated by pilots that did not establish baselines. A deployment without a baseline does not produce a number to commit to, regardless of how well the agent actually performs. The realistic 90-day deliverable for a disciplined mid-market deployment is a working pilot pattern that scales into 12 to 18-month measurable ROI, not the 300% ROI vendor pitch.
4.
Change management. The cohort assumes the deployment changes the surrounding workflow rather than slotting into it. MIT NANDA's startup advantage finding is the diagnostic. Startups deploy AI into workflows still being designed. Enterprises deploy AI into workflows whose process structure was designed for non-AI tools. Enterprise procurement teams that scoop a deployment without budgeting for workflow redesign are budgeting for the struggling cohort outcome.
5.
Vendor lock-in posture. The cohort treats lock-in as an explicit procurement dimension. Exit data portability, kill switch operability, sub-processor expansion rights, model deprecation rights, rather than as something to be discovered at renewal. The 60-question RFP at AM026 operationalizes the dimension as one of the gauge axes. The struggling cohort typically signs the vendor's MSA with light edits and discovers the lock-in surface at month 18.
6.
Compliance posture. The cohort runs the deployment against the regulatory regime that actually applies. EU AI Act 6, 11, 12, 16 for high-risk deployments, 21 CFR Part 11 plus GXP plus Annex 11 for pharma, HIPAA plus state law for healthcare, and treats the audit substrate as a load-bearing part of the deployment architecture rather than a documentation afterthought.
The cohort that scores well across the 6 is the cohort that delivers.
The cohort that scores well across the 6 is the cohort that delivers on the business case. The cohort that scores poorly is the cohort that produces the 88% failure rate the slug names. The reproducibility of the gap across 4 independent datasets is what makes the framework actionable.
AM153, the McKinsey 17%.
AM053 walks the McKinsey State of AI 2025 finding that 17% of organizations report measurable EBIT impact attributable to AI at the 12-month horizon. The slippage is between self-reported attribution and audited attribution. McKinsey's number is a self-reported success that gets read as audited success. MIT's 95% is a self-reported absence of measurement that gets read as audited failure. Both readings are wrong in the same way. They conflate survey results with operational measurements.
The procurement implication of all four together.
3 concrete actions for a 2026 enterprise. First, score every active deployment on Gauge before the next review cycle. Deployment scoring below 12 are in the struggling cohort, regardless of how the project status is currently reported internally. Second, treat low-scoring deployments as a portfolio kill or fix decision, not a continuation default. The realistic move from 88 to 12 horizon through a single deployment under sustained discipline is 12 months. Deployments where the team cannot commit to the discipline within 1 to 2 quarters are better killed than rescued. Third, anchor the next procurement against the cohort, not the average. Vendor case studies typically describe the high-performing cohort. The procurement team's deployment will land in the bimodal distribution that the 4 datasets document.
Verdict update on each.
AM029 is holding. Stanford's published methodology is intact. The deployment cohort is fixed at 51. Cadence is 60 days. AM132 is holding. The 4 datasets are linked. The bimodal shape is documented across the 4. Cadence is 60 days. AM128 is holding. The MIT NANDA report is published. The 95% framing and the build versus buy 67-22 spread are documented. Cadence is 60 days. AM053 is holding. The McKinsey 17% figure is published. The self-reported versus audited slippage is named. Cadence is 90 days.
What would change any of them?
For AM029, a new Stanford DEL update with refreshed deployment cohort. For AM132, vendor side or analyst side coordinated narrative shift on the bimodal framing. For AM128, MIT NANDA published 2026 follow-up to the 2025 report. For AM053, McKinsey State of AI 2026 mid-year refresh.
Final word.
The 4 claims, the 4 primary datasets, and the Gauge diagnostic are linked at agentmodeai.com/holding. The Sunday brief ships every week with what moved on the ledger.
Holding up. See you next Sunday.